Aren't you tired? Aren't you tired? What will it take to make you see? They don't want you. We can't get justice under this construct called the American way of life. We can't get full freedom. We can't get equality of opportunity. So Elijah Muhammad said, we want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed. Isn't that nice? To be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of our own, either on this continent or elsewhere. Well, wait. Sisters, have you had an abusive man in your life? Can the church say amen? When you have an abusive man in your life, and the more you try to show that man how much you care, how much you love, and then he keeps abusing you, what thoughts come to your mind? No, wait, don't kill him, for God's sake. But don't you think about moving somewhere else? Doing something else, or being with somebody else, but not you. No matter what he does, we're like the dog, you know, that and the dog run and wag his tail and lift his leg and urinate on your leg, thinking it may be a fire hydrant. That's right. You're kind of pitiful. But Elijah Muhammad said, we believe that our former slave masters are obligated. Remember the word now, obligated, to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 or 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs. Don't say it can't be done. For all these years, the American taxpayers' money has been given every year to Israel to maintain them on the land of the Palestinians. Don't you tell me that we have not earned by our sweat and our blood a land of our own and obligate them.
Assalamu alaikum. I am your brother, Donell Muhammad, a student in the ministry class under the divine professorship of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Welcome once again to another installation of the program called My Walk with Jesus as a Muslim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I further bear witness that as a Black man in America, I thank the consistency of God, the constancy of God, and that he took the time not to just send us a prophet or a messenger, but he loved us so much that he gave the greatest demonstration of love ever displayed, on the human family, he came to us himself. He prepared a body, and he came in the form of a well-made man named Master Farrakhan Muhammad. And we thank him for searching among us, finding one worthy among us in the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, his Christ, now Mahdi. And we thank the two of them for their spiritual union, producing a child, a man child, in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, their Messiah, our Jesus. I greet all of you in our nation's greeting of peace, of Assalamu alaikum. We have with us this evening a sister, a soldier, a female, a fighter, a warrior, and yes, a woman. She is a scholar in my judgment. She has written a book called Integration, the Failed, or Black Integration, excuse me. Let's make sure we get that in, because that's what it was all about, us matriculating into them. And it was a failed social experiment. They say it themselves. And this sister has taken the time to do the research, the investigation, to provide the proof for any skeptic, as you heard the minister say earlier. So without any further delay, I would like to introduce to some and present to others our sister, our friend, Sister Loray Muhammad, who will shine rays of light and sunshine on us to clear up the dark spots in our brains as it relates to integration, if there is any doubt, and you still want to do so. Sister Loray, welcome to the program. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And may I ask, with your permission, what brought you to the Nation of Islam? What was your journey? What sparked you to accept and start this path to find yourself and your God? Please tell us, Sister Loray, so that we may be inspired to stay on the path ourselves.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
My journey in Islam started as a teenager through the 5% Nation, a nation of gods and earths. At that time, they were teaching all over New York City, and in Queens, I heard them say that black man was God. So as I'm hearing them say the black man is God, and I'm going, okay, I'm a STEM, so it made more sense than what I was being taught in the church. So at some point, I don't want to give exact dates, but in high school, I started studying Islam in high school in the 5%. I also read all of the books by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad while in the 5%. So I read How to Eat to Live. I read Message to the Black Man. All of these books I was reading while in the 5%. So by 1981, I read 7 Speeches. That's when I was introduced to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which is interesting because I did see his picture all over my neighborhood as a young girl when he was teaching in Harlem, but I didn't really know who he was at that time. I was probably like 11 or so. So at 1981, I had decided to come into the nation, and when I read 7 Speeches, that just solidified it. So in 1981, I want to come out to the mosque, but at that time, the minister was teaching on Wednesday night in a church in Brooklyn at 7:30, and I didn't have anybody really to travel with me to bring me to that, particular meeting. So I had to wait until the minister came to Harlem in 1982. I accepted under the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and have been a follower of his since that time. But I was studying Islam in the 5% first, and then I came into the nation. But all of my path led me straight to the mosque. As far
All
as
praises due to Allah. Yes, ma'am. With that said, that's a beautiful journey. The story of the believer and their coming this way is always so inspirational, so refreshing. Brother Stephen, is there anyone in the chat, or do you have any questions for our sister, which I know you most certainly do, because you are the one that always digs deep.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I'd like to greet you in the greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So my question is, this is a very timely book when we see so much going on in the world, and we see this dissatisfaction, and we see what we saw on November the 6th with, what many in the mainstream media call insurrection.
Right.
So my question is, Black integration, a failed social experiment. What prompted you to write this book? Because I know that as a person writing a book, it's very difficult to put pen to thought to paper. So what prompted you and drove you to complete this book?
While I was in college, I was studying Islam, and I read Message to the Black Man in America. At that time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated that integration would not work. Now, what made me focus on that, because at that time, integration was in its infancy. It hadn't even been 10 years from the time it was these laws were signed to the time that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad revealed this book. So I'm going, man, how does he know? I mean, he said it with emphasis, this is not going to work. So it always stuck with me. And as a person who studied sociology in college and political science, I'm going like, how would he know? And I'm a person that always challenges when someone gives me information. So you can say something to me and I'll take it on face value, but at some point I'm going to have to look into that thing because I want to know for surety what you said was right and exact. That's one of the reasons why I love the minister, is because he says a thing and then I watch it play out in real time. And sometimes years later, but it always comes to pass.
Yes.
When the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that, it stuck in my mind. So when I decided to write a book, I said, let me investigate integration and see how it's going. So I thought about national statistics only because I didn't want it to be just my experience in New York. As I traveled around the country, I've seen certain things, but I really wanted to look at national data so we can see how it's going on the national level. I didn't want it to be anecdotal. I didn't want it to be I saw. I wanted to be this is what's playing out based on their own statistics.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. And so I wanted to ask you, just getting into the book, of course, I got my copy and you did sign it for me.
Oh, man.
No, I know you don't remember that, but you did sign it for me. So, I mean, so when we open up the book and we get past the introduction, what you come to first is Blacks and prenatal care. Blacks and prenatal care. Now, I have a nonprofit organization called Knowledge for Life, and we do health and wellness conferences. And one of the conferences that I always like to try to focus on is the rate of maternal and infant mortality. It's like a canary in the gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say about infant mortality and maternal mortality? And if you could explain that to those who may not know what we're talking about.
When I was writing the book, I wanted us to discuss from the cradle to the grave. So that's why I started with infant mortality, prenatal care, all of these things. And I end with Social Security. I end with senior citizens, I believe, senior care. With the women who are having babies, a lot of times we don't know what we need to do to protect our health. So we're dealing with the fact that our nutrition has to be a certain way. We have to be getting exercise. We have to be even the thoughts that we're thinking, the environment that we're putting ourselves in. All of those things impact our child and impact our physical health. So now but even with all of those things perfect, I mean, perfectly, you take care of yourself perfectly, you still enter in a system, a hospital system that's hostile. They are concerned about the rate of births of Black women. And that is a big issue because if you're coming into your enemy's hospital and they're concerned about how many babies you're having, then there's a way that they can eliminate that. And the way you eliminate that is to reduce you make sure that these women don't come out of the hospital, because if you're coming in and you're having one baby, and then they make sure that you're not going to have a second, a third, and a fourth because you're not here. So I don't want to come out and say that it's intentional, but the odds should not be that a woman comes in this time frame with all the medical information that they have, with all of the resources that these hospitals have. Why are so many Black women dying? And so what is the comparison between Black women's statistics and female white women's statistics? If it's so disproportionately, we have to look at the why. And sometimes you have to recognize that we're walking into these people's hospital and they have their own agenda. Their agenda is not for you to come in and leave the same way. If that was the case, we wouldn't have such a high rate. And then you have women who've complained and told the nurses that they had an issue. They told them they were feeling pain. They told them there was an issue going on and nobody investigated it, because it's like, whatever, we don't want you here in the first place. So why are you showing up at and you're having a baby? We can't even have babies because their birth rate is going down. Our birth rate is going up. They want to make sure that they can eliminate us. And if they can eliminate us at birth, they're willing to do it.
What about all these cesarean recommendations all the time?
See, the cesarean section, it should be a rarity. It should not be a situation where most women are having cesarean sections, because that's a major operation. And so you got to remember there's money to be made with cesarean sections. A woman that comes in and has a vaginal delivery, she's going to be out of the hospital within 24 hours. Her insurance company is going to only pay X amount of dollars. But if you have a cesarean section, you're going to stay longer. There's more money to be billed. You have all these medicines and anesthesiologists, and everybody's making money on that cesarean section. But also, the cesarean section increases your rate or risk of complications and premature death.
And limits how many babies you can have too, right? Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like a fallacy, because they tell you that. But I did research.
Okay, please.
And when I did my own research, because one of my children was a cesarean section. So they were saying, oh, you can only have X amount, but that's not really the case. You just have to be knowledgeable. And when you enter and say, no, the research says A, B, and C. And so just because you have one cesarean section does not mean that you have to have another, unless you have some kind of issue that's, that physically you cannot push that child out. You should be able to have a vaginal delivery. But if you don't know that, they will cut you again. And then that may limit how many children you have based on they don't want to keep cutting you. But just because you have one cesarean section does not mean that you have to have, you can't have a vaginal delivery after that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, that's good news, of course, out of what we're talking about. For those who may not know, can you help us to understand the difference between integration, segregation, and separation?
Integration means that you're dropping yourself in a pot that's already established, which is what's going on here. America already has institutions that they have implemented since 1492. So now they've dragging us into these systems, and these systems are hostile to us because it was built on the premise of white supremacy. White supremacy is Black oppression, equal sign. So in order for me to maintain myself in white supremacy, I have to ensure that you never become an equal with myself. So integration is when they're controlling the system, but we're being placed into the system that they already control. Segregation, you live on one side of town, I live on the other side of town, but in both instances, I control your reality. So we may not live together, but I control what goes on in your town. And the same thing happens with integration. So even if you're coming into my system, I'm already in control of that system. So whether it's education, whether it's the hospital, whether it's employment, all of these things already been established before you come in. Too many times we think because a politician is in a political theater, they can help you, but they're employees and they function based on the dictates of their employment. These policies have already been established, and you really can't maneuver past those policies. So just because someone is elected and happen to be Black doesn't mean that they'll be able to benefit us as a group. Separation, you control everything. You control all systems that impact your society. So whether it's the banking institution, whether it's housing, whatever it is, you're in control of it. So you dictate how that thing functions. So we're in a capitalist system that has benefited from our enslavement, and they will always be willing to maintain that enslavement, whether it's slavery, Jim Crow, or mass incarceration, because they benefit from it. And that's what Western civilization has been built upon. Slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism. They're not going to give these systems up until they're forced to give them up, and they're willing to use their military might to ensure that these systems remain in place.
Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful. So I wanted to play this clip, and then I want to get back into, what is, I guess, when you talk about integration, when we come back, can you talk about why it's so difficult for some of us to focus or to accept that separation is a solution, and as of course we believe is the only solution? But I'll play this clip, and when we come back, we can get right into that.
Let me go to the Bible first. The Bible says, Jesus talking, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man who sowed wheat in a field. And while men slept, an enemy crept in and sowed tares in among the wheat. At a certain point, the wheat and the tare look just alike. So you can't jump in there ahead of the season to try to separate the wheat from the tare, because you might be killing the wheat thinking you're killing the tare, because they both look alike. But in the proper season, if you're patient, the wheat will bear fruit, the tare won't. Then you can see the wheat, see the tare at that time. You must come in to harvest and separate the wheat from the tare. The wheat, he said, we will gather into the barn, but the tare we shall bind and burn. Jesus talking. He didn't stop there. He made another parable of the sheep and the goat. And sometimes the sheep and the goat will be together, but the nature of the two is different. Sheep is a peaceful little fella. The goat is just always into some mischief, but the goat and the sheep, Jesus is a country boy. See, it's wonderful to grow up on the farm. He didn't grow up in no big city. He could make parables out of nature because he was close to nature, and he knew that if he used parables, those of us who were close to nature, who grew up on a farm and whatnot, we understand Jesus. He said, the sheep, he wants the sheep. And he would go after the one sheep that got lost. But he didn't care nothing about the goats. He gonna separate the sheep from the goat. I don't know why you call your children your kids, unless you a goat. Don't understand the nature of a goat, and that a kid is the offspring of a goat. Never call your children your kids. Let white folk refer to his as kids until you teach him better and he become better. But you don't have kids, don't raise kids. You raise that which is submissive, like a sheep and a lamb but submissive to God and not to Satan and the evildoers. All right. Now that's Bible.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, really out of that clip, but to answer the question that we went into it is, why is it so difficult for some of us to even think about separation when we're catching so much hell and we see him all over the world giving people, especially those of darker hue, hell?
There's what they call Stockholm syndrome. And when someone's kidnapped and dragged into captivity, the longer they're in captivity, the more they attach to their captive. It's a defense mechanism because the person is trying to survive the captivity. But the longer the person is with the captive, the more they take on the mindset of the person who kidnapped them. So now, if someone can get Stockholm syndrome from being kidnapped for 1 month, when you get kidnapped, the first thing they say, okay, that person has Stockholm syndrome. We got to sit them down. We got to debrief. We got to put them to some kind of mental health to make sure that they move past the post-traumatic stress of the incident. We've been here for almost 5 centuries. We've experienced the worst treatment any human being has ever experienced.
That's right.
And so over time, we have bonded to the people who have kidnapped us. And all we're trying to do is hope that it'll get better. Pray that it's going to get better. Hopefully they won't beat me as bad as they beat me last week. This has gone on for centuries and centuries and centuries. It becomes a mindset to the person who's a captive to want to just pray and hope that it's going to get better, especially when we've been here for as long as we've been here. So now we're at the point where we're supposed to be leaving based on biblical scripture. And some of us are still holding on to that slave master because it's like, you read the Bible, but do you actually believe the Bible? Do you believe that God would actually come to you after he promised you that he would come? And that's part of the difficulty we're having. We have to get our people to understand that God kept his word, that God wasn't going to, when he said he was coming to us after the 400 years of servitude with them, he kept his promise.
Right.
So we've aligned ourselves so much with them, we're looking for a white man to come and save us. So any white man who comes and promises us something, we believe he's going to be our savior.
Right.
So that's why we run to the DNC. We're going to vote. We're going to vote. We're going to vote. But at the end of the day, those are the same people that gave us the crime bill. Those are the same people that gave us mass incarceration. The Grand Old Party sold us drugs and caused the crack epidemic. But at the same time, we're still thinking that if we keep voting, or that's what they're telling us to do, because we have some people who are just, telling us to vote and we died for this. Oh, you have to vote. Not voting says as much as voting. Matter of fact, it's a stronger indicator because they always monitor how many people vote. When you study political science, they'll tell you only a certain segment of the population votes. Some of them are so removed from the political process, they don't even bother. So I think what we're going to have to do is say, all right, if you want us to vote, what are you going to give us in return? Besides a photo op and the promise of what you're going to give me. I think the black vote should be withheld in exchange for sovereignty. So if you want me to vote, you say you want us to vote as a bloc, what are you going to give us in exchange? How many states are you willing to give us in order for us to vote for one party or the other party? Because it's very obvious that we're never going to get freedom just being in America, because they benefit from our enslavement. They benefit from our pain. They benefit from us going to jail. They benefit from our alcohol use, our overeating, our substance abuse. All of these things that we're doing to self-medicate, they benefit from.
That's right.
So we have to decide as a group that it's not going to be beneficial for us to remain. And then another issue is they put certain people in front of us to make you think that you have, this person made it, therefore you can make it. But the reality is that if you grew up poor, you're going to probably remain poor. And even if you get middle class, you can't pass that job off to your grandchildren and your great grandchildren.
Right.
Unless you have something that you can call your own, you cannot will that to anybody. So your good paying job does not help your children. And so once we see, we have to open our eyes, and the treatment plan is message to the black man in America.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
treatment plan is our Savior has arrived. The treatment plan is fall of America. Those are and everything, of course, that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says out of his mouth. We have to pay close attention to everything he says, whether it's Savior's Day or any other lecture that he gives, because he's given us guidance that we need to survive, and we cannot survive without that guidance. As long as we're holding on to a ship that we know is sinking, we're destined to drown. Every few days, you hear of another nation that's going to go into BRICS. I think 3 African nations just now said that they were going to go into BRICS.
Mm.
That movement from American dollar to the BRICS is going to have an impact on the economy. So we're going to stay around not preparing an economy for ourselves that's separate from their economy and go down with the ship. We have to make decisions that's going to impact not only us, but our children and our grandchildren. So what are we going to do? We have to think for ourselves. We can't assume that because someone stands in front of us and promises every 4 years they're going to give us stuff. Count the things that they've already given us. They promised to give us.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. And I mean, woof, I mean, you said so much there. It's so packed. I mean, I guess we'll go ahead. Well, the election, no, let's just, I'm going to stick with the book. I mean, you said so much. I mean, it's just so, we're going to have to already have you on again, sis. I'm serious. Right. Because I can tell we're not going to get through this book. Yes, because the next chapter that we're looking at is talking about education. And one of the things that you already talked about was, well, you said from the cradle to the grave, and I'm thinking from school to prison pipeline. Right. Talk a little bit about education and why that's a failure.
It's a failure because the first day we come into school, they start teaching us about George Washington. They teach us everything that we need to know about their culture, nothing about our culture. When DeSantis gave his concession speech and threw his weight behind Trump, the first thing he said was, we have to teach a classical education. We have to save our civilization. So what they plan to do, they want to teach a classical education to Black children because we are the majority of the students who are currently enrolled in school. So even if they're not in power, they can continue to be in power because they're in power over our brain. As a man thinketh, so is he. So if we think that white supremacy is the way, we're going to implement white supremacy based on our education, and we'll keep their civilization going, even if they're not here to tell us to do it. And that's the problem with education. We have to have an education that's totally independent from them and teach our children what they need to know. And our beginning did not start with slavery.
That's right. Beyond the plantation, beyond the plantation.
That's right. And, you know, when you're talking about education, you know, the educational system is really even failing their children today. When you look at America, it's falling further and further behind other industrialized nations. And so when you think of education and what we call this high tech, moving into this high tech society, right, and where our schools are, many of our schools, some of them don't even have computers, right, don't even have proper internet access. I just heard a program yesterday where they were talking about redlining redlining me in the area of your being able to even access a strong internet connection.
Right, right.
What future do we have if we can't even learn how to navigate through a computer?
We have to remember that employment is a scarce commodity. And if I can eliminate the competition for my children at the educational level, then my children don't have to compete with other children. And that's one of the reasons why they always miseducate us, because they don't want us to compete with their children on in the employment reality. A lot of times, if you can, they already know who's going to go to jail based on whether they can read or write at the 3rd grade, I think it is. It's either 3rd or the 5th grade. So they make sure that we can't read or write, so that we'll end up in jail. Now I think it's the Navy is permitting people to enter without a high school diploma. That's very recent. I think I read it yesterday or today.
Wow.
Was they need bodies to go and fight these wars they're getting ready to start. So now you used to have a high school diploma to get in. Now they'll accept you without a high school diploma to get into the military. And the people who don't get high school diplomas are the ones that end up in prison. And they know this. And that's the reason why they're making sure that we don't have proper education so they can fill their prisons with Black and brown people. And now you're in there working and making a job for little and no money because now you're back in slavery. And these industries are making untold amount of money putting you in. I think it was Florida that was going to sue because they were going to sue Florida. Private industries were going to sue Florida because Florida was not maintaining a high incarceration rate.
Right.
They wanted to ensure, because if they're building these prisons and they like the minister said, they need somebody to fill those prisons. And so when they're filling these prisons, they're also filling jobs because they test them to figure out who can do what. So because so much money is being made by the prison industrial complex, they have to make sure that someone's going in. Foster children usually end up in prison. There's certain groups that end up in prison. If you have poverty, foster children, if your parents are incarcerated, you have a higher rate of being incarcerated. All of these things they know are going to feed into that industrial complex. You think they stop their own business? They're going to make sure they always have somebody to go in. So you go from juvenile detention to adult prison.
And one of the things also when you talk about privatized prison is that because they're on Wall Street, they by law have to make a profit. And when we think about that, we have to think about just modern day slavery. And so, that goes right on into the next chapter, which is talking about employment, or really the lack of employment, being unemployed, because we have always been the first or the last hired and the first fired. Can you talk about employment?
With employment, one of the problems with employment is that a lot of us are getting jobs based on recommendations from friends and family. So because we have a higher unemployment rate, it's difficult to get that referral because unless you already have somebody working there, who is going to refer you? Then they're weeding us out by name. They're weeding us out by zip code. They have an idea if you live on this street that you're more than likely Black. And so all of these things are ways for them to keep us from being employed. And even when they release the unemployment rate, we have to remember that prison population is not factored into the unemployment statistics. So if you have 1 million men in jail who are working in jail, they're not counted in the unemployment statistics. So I remember one of the people from the Biden administration said, "Oh, we have the lowest unemployment rate for Black men, for Blacks in America." I say, "Well, are you not factoring the prison population?" If you would have factored that group in, you would find out our rate of unemployment is always double theirs. It might even be triple if you start factoring in all of the people that are in jail.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things that you just spoke about was, I think we all can bear witness that when you drive down that highway or you're in that drive down that city street and you see them doing road construction or you see them laying pipe or whatever they're doing, whatever they have big machinery, one of the things that you do recognize is they don't have many Black bodies. And one of the things that what you talked about, that nepotism, is that they may put out that this company is looking for employees, but really in truth they hire Jim Bob, who is their cousin, Mary Sue, who is their niece. You know what I'm saying? But they're not gonna hire Willie. And then if Willie do get a job, then they give Willie such a hard way to go that he goes home stressed the HELL out.
High blood pressure.
Absolutely.
High blood pressure, stroke, all that.
So when we talk about healthcare, can you go into that? Because one of the things that you talked about was this history of, for instance, doctors not recognizing Black people's pain threshold. And from what I have understood is they're still, to a large degree, teaching that Black people, that our pain threshold is different than theirs. And so a lot of people, a lot of diabetics, instead of treating them in a certain way, they amputate. Can you talk a little bit about that healthcare, or I shouldn't even, it's not even healthcare. Can you talk about that system?
It's death care, death care.
Healthcare has always been rationed based on who has insurance and who does not. And even if you have full insurance, there's no guarantee you're going to get proper care.
Right.
The reason why we have to build our own hospitals and ensure that our professionals are kept to the standard of making sure that our people have what they need. When they deprived us from painkillers a while back, it really backfired, because they were giving their people all of these drugs. Oxycodone, I think, was one of them. It resulted in many of them getting addicted to it, and they went out and started buying heroin. One of the reason why the heroin rate went so high with white people is because they were strung out on all of these over-the-counter medications. So they were depriving us of the painkillers and giving it to their own people because they knew that they needed painkillers. And it actually facilitated a lot of the heroin problem that they have in the suburbs at this time.
Right. I wanted to just, talk on that just a little bit, because, this subject, it just gets me kind of heated, and I'm trying to be cool with it. Right. But I remember growing up watching television and seeing them black boots stomp down a person's door because of crack and the crack epidemic. We saw them drive into some of our community with tanks.
Right.
But now what we see for the white man, when he's hooked up on that opioids, that they
Methadone,
have these,
or the methamphetamines. No,
right.
what is it called? Yeah, the
meth,
the meth,
the
rotten
that's
teeth,
right.
the whole nine. Now it's a disease.
Of course it is.
Right.
So now we got to set up health facilities. But when your child did it, he was just a thug, a predator, a super predator. And we're going to hold him over, even though he'll maybe 13 or 14, we're going to hold him over until he's an adult, and then try him again so they can keep that prison full, as the sister pointed out earlier.
So can you talk about the these treatment centers? I forget what another name for them, but can you also talk about, a lot of our people are in prison because of weed, while white people are making hand over fist? Can you talk about those two issues?
And these are the things that should demonstrate that you live with your enemy.
Right.
The fact that when we have a misstep, we're criminalized. When they have a misstep, they pulling out a pillow and making sure when they hit the ground that they don't get hurt too much. And the reality is, the nation that locked us up for crack are the same nation that sold the crack to us.
Right.
And so this is the reason, like, who am I voting for? The drug trafficker or the mass incarcerator? Somebody needs to tell me. And so this shows you how they perceive us. They perceive us as their internal enemy. And that's the reason why when we do something that they perceive to be wrong, they're kicking in your door, they got the tank rolling down your street. But when their children do the very same thing, they find an excuse. Anytime you hear about a mass shooter and they start talking about, we think he had mental health, we already know he's white.
Right.
They don't have to show the picture, because we already know they naturally make up an explanation and excuse for their people. And they naturally criminalize us. Even if we have mental health, they're never going to say it.
Right.
Right. That's true.
They give them.
That's
so
true.
This is concrete information. They're telling you, we hate you.
They're telling you in your face.
In your face. But our people, I don't care what they do, I don't care what criminality they involve themselves in, they're really going to be punished for it.
Let's go ahead and play this next clip, and then we'll get right on into it again.
Now let's go to the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran. Surah 30. I read 41, 42, and 43 verses. Corruption, mischief has appeared on the land and the sea on account of what men's hands have wrought. Why is the president talking about corporate greed? Corruption is everywhere on account of what men's hands have wrought. Then Allah says that Allah may give them a taste of some of their deeds in order that they may turn away or turn back from evil. Then Allah says to Muhammad, say, travel in the land and see what was the end of those before you. Most of them worship others beside Allah. Travel in the land and see what was the end of those before you who had somebody calling them to a straight and a right path, and they rejected it and set up rivals and partners with God. See what was their end and know that if that's what you're doing, your end is the same. Now look at this. Look at this now. It says, set your face to the right religion. Set your face, meaning, you know, when your face is set, that means you're focused. You ever see when a fighter is getting in the ring, he's made his training, he's worked hard, he denied himself his wife for 2 months. He get in the ring eating raw meat. This boy is ready to kill concrete. And you can look at his eyes when he says, fighters, you know, come to the center of the ring. And you see them step and stare at each other like two cocks in a cockfight or two dogs in a dog fight. Their face is set. Well, what is God saying? Set your face. Be focused for the right way of life. Not the way of life that you live in that's causing you grief, but set your face, start looking with purpose for the right way of life, a way of life that puts you in obedience to God. Set your face for that. It said, before there comes from Allah that which cannot be averted, and on that day they shall be separated. What is the day that can't be averted? That's the day of judgment. I don't care what Bush does. He got to face the real God of power. There's a real court that has already been set up for him. Because if no other nation can judge him, like no nation could judge Pharaoh, no nation could judge Nebuchadnezzar, but God was able to judge what others could not judge because he had power over all things. So set your face for the right way of life before there comes from Allah that which cannot be averted, and on that day they will be separated.
Yes, sir.
Powerful. Powerful. So
I'm ready to separate. Let's go. I'm ready to separate. Let's do it.
you know, one of the things that the minister is talking about though, is that we will be separated even against our will.
Right.
This is what is written in the scripture, that
Right.
we will be separated even if we don't want to be separated from
Right.
him.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that, and then we'll get into the homeless issue, because they have now what they call tent cities,
Right.
not just a tent on the street. Now it's tent cities.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Whichever one you want to begin with first.
God said every knee will bow, willingly or unwillingly. And I remember the minister did a lecture. He said only 10% of us will come at hearing the word. The other percentage would have to be chastised. And so as God is chastising America, we are also being chastised.
Right.
Natural disasters that are happening every day that they're not even covering.
Right.
The earthquakes, the floods, I mean, it's constant. And so, unfortunately, some of us will only be moved by that particular experience. We'll remember Sunday school when the water is flooding in our houses. It's unfortunate, but that's what's going to happen. The homeless population is based on greed. There's plenty of homes being built. There's plenty of apartments being built. But unfortunately, the wages are so low that most people cannot afford to live there.
Right.
If you go into the homeless shelter, most of the people that are there are working, but they're working poor. And even middle class is finding it difficult to find a housing that they can afford. One of the things that Romney said when we were going through the housing crisis, which was created by the bank's sidebar, he said we should start buying up all of the houses and renting them to people, which would be returning the people to the feudal system, because you'll never own anything. You'll just be there renting. So you're not going to hand this house down to your children. You're not going to sell it and do something else. You will always be a renter. So when they were saying it, people were, I mean, he said it and people didn't pick up on it. But now that's what they've been doing. They've been buying up all of these foreclosed homes, and now they're renting those homes out. So now if the man wants you to rent his house and he wants $2,000, but you're making minimum wage, how are you going to afford that house? The apartments have gone sky high. Sometimes these apartments cost more than what you would pay if you had a mortgage.
Right.
So it's a whole conspiracy to me to keep people living in the street, because if you know that I need $15 an hour just to get by, just to pay for an apartment in the area that I happen to live, why would you give me $725?
Right. Come on now. It's crazy.
And
you know, sis, not to cut you off, but you know, I listen to a lot of talk radio, right? A lot. I can't even listen to the black radio stations because of the garbage that they play on there. I just can't listen to it anymore. So I listen to a lot of talk radio. And one of the things that they were talking about is that, you know, once apartments were rented out from individuals, a ma or a pop, you know, operation, but they said, just as you were saying, that these big corporations actually own these apartment buildings now. And like you said, capitalism, it's all about how much they can suck the life out of you as a people. How much can we take out of the people? But like you said, you know, the wages don't even keep up with the standard of living, which they said in some places $14, $15, but they're paying a minimum wage of $7. It's crazy.
Right.
And
what kind of sense does that make?
And another thing, when they're buying up these homes too in big blocks, they're forcing the price of the house to go up, because when they calculate your taxes, they're basing it on how much the person next door sold their house for. So if my neighbor has the same house as I have, and they sold his house for some large amount of money, my property taxes are going to go up, because they're assuming that I can sell my house for that same amount. Now, I haven't gotten a dime because I haven't sold anything, but your property taxes are already going to go up, and so is your insurance. So now you mention that person who is in their home, can they afford to pay this additional property tax? Can they, you know, continue to pay the taxes and the insurance? So now, even though they're buying up blocks, they're creating a false market because they're acting as though everyone can purchase or sell a home at this rate. So it's a whole, like, I don't want to say a Ponzi scheme, but it's just greed. They're just being very, and they don't care how it impacts the neighborhood. They don't care how it impacts the individual homeowner. So they're saying now a lot of senior citizens are becoming homeless because they can't afford to live where they used to live with the income that they currently have.
That is correct.
And you know, I know we're talking about Black people and separation, but this is happening to white people too. They just don't care. They don't care anything about the future of the you know, the way that the white man, he sees some of his actions and what it's causing, but he's not thinking anything about his children's future. He just thinking of lining his own pocket.
That's exactly right. Not only that, he sees it as the ignorant. In other words, the poor white man is not a concern of his anymore either. Thus, this whole vaccine thing, they vaccinating the poor, the black, the brown, the red, and the poor whites. See? And they're so ignorant. For example, Trump is saying all these things that they want to be able to say, but don't have the platform. So Trump becomes the personification of how all white folks really feel, but they don't have the platform to say it. So even though he's not doing anything for them really materially, financially, but he says what they feel, and that's enough for the poor, ignorant white boy. That they told Barack Obama, you'll never get, Hillary Clinton told him, you'll never get that rural, poor white boy or that white hillbilly down there in West Virginia, you know, in the coal mine. But Trump tell them, oh, we're going to get you back on coal. Knowing they going, well, coal ain't never coming back. Never coming back.
Right. And so, as student minister is saying, can you talk a little bit about the elections and voting? Because like you were saying in the very beginning, many of us really believe in that process, a process that is totally corrupted. Even if you didn't think that the voting machines were rigged, it's totally corrupted by money, by these lobbyists, by these special interest groups, by the Zionist forces that control half of the government. Can you talk about voting
But you got to vote like your life depends on it, though. You got to vote, brother. You must vote. We'll die. Oh,
Propaganda. When I took political science, they told us that voting had no influence. It's the people who have money who can speak to the president directly. It's the lobbying groups that can contact them and say, this is what I want. In many instances, the lobbyist is writing the legislation based on what their needs are. That's why you'll find that they won't write anything that affects a certain segment of the population, because those are the people who control government. Government has never been controlled by the people that you think are controlling the government. And the president has someone they have to answer to. They select presidents in advance. They call it I think it's the secret election, where they decide who's going to be the next person that's going to run in 2028,
right,
2032, 2036, and they have to come before the elites and have a discussion with them, and they need them to be on code. If they're not on code, then they're not going to get elected. And if they get elected and they get off code, they have ways of dealing with that too.
right.
Right. And you know, as you're saying, you know, one of the things that they have to come before these people is because I just heard where Alexandria Cortez, the sister,
Alexandria Cortez,
right, that she was approached by, I think it was the what's the Jewish lobby,
AIPAC.
Yes, and they were going to give her $100,000 to do something, and she turned it down. But the thing that they were saying is that even though she may turn it down, then they will give that money to an opponent of theirs. So when we look at the money that's involved in even running to be elected, there's no the as the minister said, quoting the Bible, that the poor have no voice.
And they don't want us to have a voice.
Right.
So I know we're at the bottom of the hour. Mental health, another crisis in the Black community, and we know that really the mental health crisis is due to so many factors, because we never, we have How to Eat to Live by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, book 1 and book 2, because we never related eating to the gut, to the brain. And now they're saying that what we eat affects our gut bacteria affects our mental health.
Well, they said that, and sister, please come with what you have to say. That one of the first things the minister said these words: the first thing that every prophet did before they did anything else, they changed the diet of their community, because the chemistry and the nutrients in foods have the same effect that these psychological drugs, not medicine, has on a mental patient. So if we eating the king's meat, and pork has an effect, and this has an effect, then God changes the diet, thus How to Eat to Live, book 1 and 2. And so we don't think the same way anymore. That's not because we just decided not to think that way. It's the revelation and then the food. And so, yes, mental health is a problem. But like Sister said earlier, they don't care. They shoot our mental children down dead. While they walk up on Donell roof and other killers with the gun is still in their hand. The last point I'll make, and Sister can come right back in. There was a white man, I forget the exact state. He had took his stepchildren out and lined up, made them get down on their knees, got behind them, blew each one of them's brains out. One ran off into the woods. He tracked him because he was a hunter, brought him back, executed him, sat down on his porch. When the call went out, the police pulled up. I mean, we're talking about a phalanx of them, and they asked him from the blowhorn behind their vehicles, put the rifle down. I mean, he said it to ad infinitum. The white man didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't respond. They walked up on him, put the rifle down. He still didn't do it. They took the rifle out of his lap, laid him down gently, handcuffed him, and walked away. Had that been you, they would have sniped you from the street. Wouldn't even ask you to put it down, just killed you because they see the children laying out there in the yard.
Right.
Talk about mental health.
And just and real quick, when they as just veggie backing off of what you're saying, brother minister, is that when they don't even classify our children as mentally ill when they shoot them down, or whenever something happens, but every situation, school shooting, a rampage, mass murder, it's gotta be, if they're white, it's gotta be a mental health issue.
And also, when it's us, not only do the child get investigated, they'll investigate you and run down your history and your past. Here's a man right here in Columbus, Ohio, up in Delaware, a black man who had his own, it was like a pottery shop, antique shop, had it for like 40 years. Somebody broke in. He was a pillar of the community. Somebody broke in one time and killed him. And the reporter, and this is no exaggeration, the reporter ran this beautiful story down about how the man was, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, out of nowhere, they was getting ready to go off. He said, but he sold marijuana at one time in his past when he was a teenager. And then it just went on. He said, I'm sitting there, even myself, you normally up for certain things white folks do, but that would even, what did he just say? What did that have to do with the man?
Can leave no pure image untarnished.
No.
None. But go right ahead, sister, because I know we're taking over, talking about this issue.
No, it's all right.
But she inspired this, though. She's responsible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Our food intake is very important because it has impact on not only our physical health, but our mental health. If you don't have proper diet, that can manifest and appear to be a mental health issue when it's really not.
Right.
They tell us before someone comes into you for counseling, make sure they've had a complete physical and that they know whatever, if they're deficient in vitamin C or D or any nutrients, because that can come out and appear to be a mental health issue when the person just needs vitamin K. So that is very, very important. Now, how are these people who are living on the street, how are they getting their proper nutrition? How are these people that are living under the bridge getting their proper nutrition?
Right.
And if they're eating basic foods, some of them might just be eating canned foods. They might just be eating boxed food. That stuff has little to no nutritional value. If you're eating McDonald's, all of these places that we eat that have processed food, if you look at the nutritional breakdown, it's high in calories. It may taste good, but it has no nutritional value whatsoever, very little. So now, of course, if you have no nutritional value in your body can't function properly, and it may come out either in a physical health situation or a mental health situation. So all of these things are important. We have to ensure that we're getting proper food, but you can't give proper food and proper diet if you don't have a place to live or money to pay for the food.
Yes.
That's why all things that are necessities should not be a commodity.
Right. Every human need is a human right, according to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
So I guess as we wrap this up, I mean, of course, there's so much more that's in this book that talks about how integration, which is a hypocritical trick by our 400 enemy, who wanted to make us think that he had all of a sudden become our friend. This book right here, and just us living in reality, we can see that integration is not working. And if you all don't mind, if we could just, as we close this out, just open it up just as a conversation.
Sure.
When we look at integration, when we look at our situation today, our situation is so bad. It's so deplorable in 2023. I think that separation is not just political, it's survival at this point, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
you cannot survive. We cannot coexist with someone who's trying to kill you. You have to make a decision. Do you want to live or do you want to die? That's the bottom line.
And I remember, you just said that the minister did a lecture. I know it was separation or death, but when you really think about that, that's what it really is all about. I remember hearing student minister Ishmael saying that, there is a way that seemeth right. So the Western culture is a culture that is it's not a Black culture. It's not an African culture. It's not an Eastern culture. It is a separate and distinct culture where it is based on going to war with what is natural. Like they say, we're at war with the weather. Are you at war with the weather? You know what I mean? We're at war. They're always at war with something. And so and so us taking on that and our nature being to submit to God, his nature being to rebel or go to war with things, it's literally killing us. Trying to, but and I say that when I say killing us, because the more that we're integrated into him, the longer that we've been integrated into him, it's very difficult now when you look at a black person to not see in that mindset a white mindset. We don't even have our own mindset anymore.
We are called black white people. But one
Yeah.
other point before we go on, sister, please tell us how we can get your book.
Absolutely.
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Black Integration, a failed social experiment.
And if you're on Twitter, when you Google my name, when you look me up on Twitter, you'll see it right there. And
Thank you.
There's a book right there.
Thank you.
And we do have the link in the description. So if anybody wants to go to your website, they can click on that link and connect with you through there. So I guess I don't want to end it, but it's time to go. So, sister, we want to just go ahead and give you the last words. If you could give us the last words, and we'll play one last video by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And before we do, if we could all say something real quick about this upcoming Savior's Day. But the student minister, if you could lead us off with that.
Sure. I can literally predict with mathematical certainty that this particular Savior's Day, at the end of the day, as Mr. Ishmael indicated in his before last presentation, we are at the end of the end, as the minister has said. We are not only in the last days in the sense of the day is like 1,000 years and all. We're talking about literal 24-hour days, minutes. And I believe that once he drops this bomb in Detroit, inshallah, on what does the great Mahdi have to say about the war in the Middle East, and the great Messiah have to say, it will be there won't be no other discussion need be said about it.
Mm-hmm.
It will be the definitive closing arguments, and after closing arguments come in, there ain't no more discussion. Judgment is the next thing after closing arguments. I believe that's what we're going to see immediately after, along with the mother plane and the baby planes. We're going to see it all.
No doubt. Absolutely. And sister, what do you want to say something about that? And then one more thing, and then we can begin to close it out.
One thing I have to say is all roads lead to Detroit, Michigan.
Yes, ma'am.
2024.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And so one other thing that we would like for us to talk about, and we'll close it on out, is the lawsuit against the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, and the Southern Poverty
Simon
Law Center.
Wiesenthal Center.
Yeah, the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Yes, sir. Thank you, brother.
But the Southern Poverty Law Center is a part of that. I mean, it may not be in name, right, but they're all in cahoots together.
That's correct.
So you weren't wrong, but it's just the actual name on the lawsuit. They're not in the name on the lawsuit, but they will still be affected by the success. Regardless of what happens in their courts of law, the minister has already succeeded because he set a precedent that has never been set. No one's even thought to put them on a spot. So whether they deny or accept to engage, their inaction or actions will prove what he has already said about them. So they really have nowhere to go.
That's right. Sister, did you want to say anything on that before we close out?
I think they're going to lose.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to lose. It's difficult to prove that he's done something that he has not done. And he's been very merciful to them all of this time. And he's finally said, okay, enough is enough. Now you got to prove that I'm what you say that I am. And it's very difficult because they've been basically just naming people anti-Semitic based on criticism. And that's unfortunate because if you tell me I'm a murderer, then you have to prove, you got to find a body, you got to do something to prove that I murdered somebody. But just to slander me and call me a murderer and you don't have any proof, and you know you don't have proof. You just want to keep saying it, and then think everybody's going to believe you. So now you're in court and you can't bring a body. You're looking a little strange.
Right. Absolutely. And just to add just a little bit to what you all are saying is that, they've been using that as a political, but also they have been using it as a spiritual on the spiritual or religious side to claim that they are Semitic, and that then connects with they are the children of Abraham. They're the chosen people. So this whole case, is going
to expose everything.
They did a DNA test on the people in that region, and they found that they were Black. It has not been widely discussed, but this is very recent.
Exactly.
And they also found pyramids in Russia.
That's right. Yes,
that
ma'am.
has been widely discussed. So all
even by their own definition of the word Semitic, excludes Caucasians from it.
Yes.
Right.
So everything.
But what they want to say, I'm over here on OSU campus, and the young Jewish students who have their student union over there. Well, it's just that I can't agree with you. I see what you're saying. You are correct, but if I said that, they would see me as a traitor. And that, but it's been long established that when you say Semitic, it refers to Caucasian Jewry. Okay, just because that's the status quo, don't make it true.
Right.
And even when they know the truth, they're not willing to accept the truth. Because we were taught that we buried our civilizations under ice, under sand, in the jungle. So now that these things are being revealed, because they found some pyramids under, I'm trying to remember, was it not Alaska, another cold area.
I remember,
showed it to me. And they were showing that it was melting, and so if you built the pyramids in Egypt, who built the pyramids in Russia? Who built the pyramids in other parts of the world?
Right.
And so it becomes, the things that are going on support what we've been taught.
Right.
And that's basically what this is. So now, if you're going to continue to misrepresent the truth, it's just a matter of time before people look at you and say, well, these people have just been lying all of this time.
Right.
All this time.
You can't prove a lie.
Right. Right.
And one last thing is that book, the Bible ends in Revelations, and in Revelations 2.9, chapter
2 and 9, verse, 3 and 9.
Right. And 3 and 9. It says that there are those who call themselves Jews who are not. So I'll just end with that. And if there's anything else, Brother Student Minister, that you would like to say, or sister that you would like to say, I'll just go ahead and close this on out.
Go ahead and close on out,
brother.
And thank you again, sister,
thank you for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely, sister. We have to have you back to talk more, because this is going to be a real subject that a lot of our people need to begin to really.
They need to hear this. They need to get your book. That's what they need.
Absolutely. I'll close this on out. Yeah. So, brothers and sisters, thank you for watching once again. This was a powerful conversation. And if you when you get a chance, definitely get this book, because this is something that we really, really need to think about and consider. Come back every Sunday, and we're going to close out with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, The Time and What Must Be Done. And this was a powerful clip on separation.
So we are asking the government of the United States of America. Some of us are asking for reparations. They don't even want to consider it. Well, you will, because the scriptures that I quoted to you, shall the lawful captive be delivered, shall the prey be taken from the mighty. Absolutely, God is contending with you now for the complete liberation of his people. Now, of course, when Abraham Lincoln was in the Lincoln-Douglas debate, he sent for some Negroes who were educated to come to the White House. And they didn't want to leave Massa. They wanted to stay in America. And believe me, some of you are like that too. But I will say this. I want to have the chance, unhindered, to teach the time and what must be done to every black man, woman, and child in America. And after we teach that subject, then we should take a vote as to how many of us want to stay with our open enemy, or how many of us want to be separated from them in a land of our own. The promise of God is a land flowing with milk and honey. Well, milk means you have animal husbandry. Honey means you have bees that are pollinating flowers. You have vegetation. You have land that is fertile, land that is productive. What must be done? Well, America, you don't have anything for us to do. And your plan for us is genocidal. You are hoping for a race war. You are hoping that the guns that you have amassed can be used to slaughter black people. Let me say in a heartbeat, we don't carry weapons, because we want to show you and the world that we are a people of peace. So I want you all to think about what must be done. Black people, we must pool our resources. February 24th, at our annual Savior's Day convention, the subject is the economic blueprint of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to fight against poverty and want. You need to know what we must do to prepare a future for ourselves, whether it's here or elsewhere. We have to get busy. Get up from a begging position. Well, you say, we can't leave white America. I mean, that's not intelligent. Where would we go? Well, we'll talk about that in one of our next broadcasts. You say separation is not the answer. I say to the government and people of the United States, separation of us from you is the only answer. And you will soon come to know it. Now, dear brothers and sisters, if you don't wish to do for yourself, if you don't wish to separate, here's the loss that will be inflicted upon us. They are intending that those guns that are in the homes of nearly 350 million guns among 315 million Americans, and every black person in America does not have a gun. They're intending that if something happens, God forbid, and we are angered and upset and rise, they intend to mow us down.